Get Rich Education is brought to you by Norada Real Estate, International Coffee Farms, and Corporate Direct.
Garrett Sutton here, Robert Kiyosaki's asset protection attorney and the author of Loopholes of Real Estate. As an American or foreign-based investor in U.S. real estate, you know we are a litigious society. You know that you need to protect your real estate and paper asset holdings with the right mix of LLCs and corporations. My firm, Corporate Direct, not only forms these entities, but importantly, we properly maintain them too. If you fail to follow the corporate formalities, you can lose it all in an instant. Corporate Direct is your source for LLC protection and maintenance in all 50 states. Visit corporatedirect.com or call 800-600-1760. Mention Get Rich Education for a free bonus. Switch your resident agent service to us and receive another bonus. It's all good. We look forward to assisting you at corporatedirect.com.
Welcome to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold, giving you information and ideas on the investment that has turned more ordinary people into millionaires and billionaires than anything else, and can provide you with more wealth and happiness than you ever thought possible. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, and educator, Keith Weinhold.
Hey, welcome to GRE. This is Get Rich Education, episode 86. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Here's hoping that you've lived an abundant week. I'm back to help you build wealth for yourself. And what we're talking about is very realistic extra income and life-changing income for the average Joe here. And you won't end up as an average Joe. You will be able to do what most people can't because you did what most people wouldn't. Today, we're talking to one of the best-known real estate investors in the nation. That is Rich Dad Advisor, Ken McElroy. Ken's contributed to our real estate investing education industry with countless real estate investing books, both inside and outside the Rich Dad series. And at last check, he controlled more than 10,000 real estate units. I recorded Ken and I's chat the other day when I was in Anchorage. Today, I'm bringing you this show from the Alyeska Prince Hotel at the fantastic Alyeska Resort here in the rainforested ski community of Girdwood, Alaska. Although summer is in full swing now, this is the premier ski resort in the entire state of Alaska in the wintertime. And this time of year, we're enjoying the spa-like amenities, the really luxurious accommodations, and there's an aerial tram that will ride up the mountain later today. Really a fantastic scene here at this resort nestled in the Chugach Mountains. Now, if you look down lower, you can see tidewater, okay? You can see sea level here. And if you look up higher, you can see at least 5 hanging glaciers from this vantage point. So you have the paradox of seeing blue Alaska glaciers, but because you're near seawater, you can also see seagulls. Interestingly, here in Girdwood, this adjacent forest is recognized as the northernmost rainforest on Earth, and its climate is distinctly different from that of my home in Anchorage, which is just about 40 miles north of here. I think you'll like this Ken McElroy interview today. If you've ever been around Kenny, he's very easy to talk to. And by the end of this thing, we're just kind of chatting as I'm throwing questions and ideas out there. He joins me from the Phoenix area today, Scottsdale, Arizona, and this is his second Get Rich Education appearance. So here we go. From the early days of managing properties for others to being a well-known investing guru and successful entrepreneur, Ken McElroy has considerable experience in property management as well as real estate investing in both Phoenix, Arizona, and across the United States. With 26 plus years of elite level experience under his belt, he has offered his fans multiple real estate investing books and is a long-standing Rich Dad advisor to the author of the Rich Dad Poor Dad series, Robert Kiyosaki. Ken's true passion to educate others has led him to speak internationally on real estate investing, entrepreneurship, and the keys to financial freedom. Welcome back to Get Rich Education for your first appearance since you were here on episode 25, Rich Dad Advisor, Ken McElroy.
Hi, Keith. Thank you. Great to be on your show again.
Hey, it's great to have you back. It was good to see you on the Summit of Sea a few months ago as well. How are things going there? When you think about Ken McElroy, I think about the MC Company's deals that you syndicate. And you know what? 5 years ago, I was thinking Ken is probably looking at so many deals with prices being run down. He must be going nuts with all these deals. And today, what do you do? The cap rates have run down so much. I mean, what are you doing if you're not looking for deals? Or if you still are, where are you looking?
Yeah, well, we're definitely looking. We have a full acquisition team out meeting with brokers and flying around and looking at markets, and it's harder, that's for sure. It actually got harder. The reason cap rates are down is when interest rates started going down, of course, lower interest rates, lower cost of debt, more cash flow. So the prices started going up. And, we've been battling this for a few years. It's not something that just, came about.
And now, first of all, that's a paradigm to some people. When a market heats up, sometimes people think, oh, well, then cap rates must be heating up and going up. But, that's actually just the opposite. Sometimes people need to wrap their mind around that. Since the cap rate is the net operating income divided by the value of a building, when that net operating income stays about the same and the building value shoots up faster, that lowers one's capitalization rate. So cap rates actually get driven down. And, I guess my thing is, since arbitrage really is the cap rate minus a mortgage interest rate, okay, even if cap rates have been driven down, say, to 6.5 on a building, and you can still get a mortgage interest rate at 5.5, well, that's 1% arbitrage. I mean, wouldn't you still do the deal then? Of course, there's going to be a lot of it depends factors, but even if cap rates have been driven down to a point where they're still higher than mortgage interest rates, do you still go ahead? Do you still look?
Well, that's a really good question. So we look at things a little bit differently. I don't always use the cap rate as a determining factor of whether we buy something. So I'll give you an example. I think cap rates are definitely something that you need to watch. If you're trying to buy a property that is, in really good condition and full and has a stable operating history, then I think cap rate means something. But if you're buying something that, let's say, has a value add component to it, and or maybe some occupancy issues, your cap rate's not going to look good. So because you're going to buy it based on the way the property's performing and the way the rents are currently, not necessarily on the future. So we do look at cap rate, but mostly we look at cash flow. So we start with cash flow, and if we can find something that is cash flowing, in the first few months of buying it, then and we can improve it, then of course, we've got what would be a true value add.
Part of this is, I think what we're basically doing here as a real estate investor, where you have a cap rate that exceeds an interest rate, kind of what you're trying to do is be the bank effectively, or sort of do what the bank does by borrowing at a lower rate and investing at a higher rate. I saw you write a Rich Dad Advisors article recently about how banks work and how we can sort of exploit that as real estate investors. Tell us a little bit about how banks work and how that plays into what a real estate investor does in being the bank.
Yeah, sure. Well, and this also kind of ties with your last question about arbitrage, So, for example, we're in the process of buying a property right now in Mesa, Arizona, and the rate that we're projecting, the fixed interest rate, is going to be under 4%. And we've already been, this is a quote we actually already have. So our rate should be under 4 fixed, and we'll have 3 years of interest only as part of the loan. So, you think of that, you think of the banks, the reason why the interest rates are so low right now is because there's a lot of people saving money. And so the article that I wrote for Rich Dad was, what happens is money, like anything, there's a supply and a demand on money. And so if there's a lot of money in banks, then the only way banks make money is to lend it. So that's why they're trying to get everybody in credit card debt. That's why you see all these credit cards. That's why they're doing it with student debt. They're doing it with all kinds of things. They're not doing it right now with the refi, the investor loans and, all the cash out refis that they were doing, before the subprime crash. But, there's a tremendous pressure on banks to get money out, because that is the way that they make money, speaking of arbitrage. So if, let's say, somebody has $10,000 in the bank and they're making 1%, which I think today would be generous.
Okay, we're just talking about your everyday depositor.
Your everyday depositor, right. Yeah. So the bank actually, that's an expense to the bank.
Right. Now, that's a paradigm for some people. When you put $10,000 in the bank, that is an expense to the bank at that point.
Correct. Right. And that's what I wrote in that article, because if you think about it, it's true, right? I mean, if you give the bank money, you're going to want interest on it. So that's an expense to the bank. And less than 1% is not necessarily very good. So now the bank has your money, and their job is to lend it out at, say, 4, 5, 6%. And that's how banks make money. That's not the only way banks make money, but that is a big way that banks make money.
Right. So an everyday savings depositor might go ahead and deposit their money in the bank, and the bank has an obligation at that point to go ahead and pay that depositor 1%. And then what the bank's doing is they're turning around and they're loaning it to you, like the deal that you just described in Mesa, Arizona, for 4%. So the bank's arbitrage in that case is 4 minus 1, or 3%. And then what you're doing with the 4% at that point, tell us about that and how that arbitrage works for you.
Yeah, that's exactly how it works. Exactly. So I'm glad you're walking it down this way. So then I borrow the money at 4, let's say, and put it into, in this particular case, it's a $35 million apartment deal. And we're lending, actually the deal is 35 million and we're actually borrowing 28. So now I'm borrowing 28 million at 4%. So now I get into the nuts and bolts of how the deal is itself. Well, the deal, of course, pays for the mortgage, but in addition to that, it generates about 7% cash on cash return on the actual investment. So I'm using, people call it loans, but it's, I call it OPM, other people's money, because that's what it is. So money, people, I think sometimes get confused about money. It's really very simple. If I borrow something from you, you can actually give it to me in the form of equity, or you can give it to me in the form of a loan. And it's the same with a bank. So the difference is the bank is using your money. So you can give it to somebody directly, or you can give it to the bank, and then of course they're dishing it out in the form of equity and debt, because banks actually do equities too in some cases, a lot of banks. So it's the same thing with a life insurance policy, or a 401k, or even a pension. Let's say you're a union worker and you pay into a pension, or a teacher or a fireman or a policeman or something like that. That money that you're putting away gets invested. So, unfortunately, you're giving away all your power and not knowing what it's invested in. But regardless, let's say over a period of a long time, you're putting money into a pension or even a life insurance policy for that matter. Well, the reason why when you get your statements and you see return on that money, it's because it's invested in something. It's not just put into the bank. They're actually physically investing it. And so, believe it or not, pensions, life insurance companies, and banks are all trying to invest in similar things.
Right. So they're opportunists just like we want to be opportunists. In a sense, when a depositor goes ahead and puts their $10,000 in the bank, that's kind of the bank's problem. So the bank has a problem and they're encumbered with those interest payments, and they need to flip that around and go ahead and find an investment opportunity to solve that problem with.
That's exactly right. And so, that's why as you watch, it's very interesting to watch how banks compete for deposits, right? They want deposits. They give away free checking and they give away free toasters or whatever they might do. And the people are like, oh my God, this is great. I get free checking. What they're really trying to do is get you to open bank accounts so that they can actually use that money to lend it.
So really the genesis of that process is one individual saver. And first of all, you said there are more people saving these days. Why are they saving more these days?
Well, I don't think that they completely understand the system.
They definitely don't if they're saving.
Yeah, right. Correct. So that's one reason. But also, I believe that there's still some hangover from the recession, in many areas. I live in Phoenix and home prices are still, the inventory and everything that went back to the banks and everything, we're still starting to see home prices relatively flat, even though they've increased a little bit. So I think a lot of people got kind of freaked out during the subprime crash. They lost jobs, they lost all the equity in their houses, and I think this time around they're having a little bit more of a cushion, which is probably smart.
Right. So if more people are saving these days, in a sense, that creates more of a problem for the bank, if you will, because they need to go ahead and get that money reinvested. And when more banks have more problems, that's when banks begin to compete for each other. And that's probably why you're able to get terms like 4% fixed on the Mesa, Arizona apartment building and 3 years at interest only. And the genesis of that begins with there being more demand for savers.
That's exactly right. That's exactly what I would have said. So it's again, if you can look at it as, like if there's let's say you live in a town where there's a lot of excess development for houses. Well, the supply of houses are going to keep the prices down, right? And they'll start to do concessions as they try to move through that. It's the same with money. People just don't think of it that way. So when there's a lot of money looking for a home, then the price of money goes down. And that's what we're seeing right now is there's a tremendous amount of money looking for a home, which is why interest rates are low.
Yeah. Well, that tells me that I have a problem too. I need to convert more people to Get Rich Education listeners because if there are a lot of savers, none of them are Get Rich Education listeners. I can tell you that. So, hey, well, Ken and I are going to come after the break. I'm going to ask him a few more questions about now that cap rates have been run down, where does he go for deals? Does he go into a secondary market? Does he go into a tertiary market? And more. You're listening to Get Rich Education. Our guest is Rich Dad Advisor Ken McElroy. More when we come back. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Now, this is something exciting. Through Get Rich Education and International Coffee Farms, you can once again own your own half-acre parcels of a passive income-generating coffee farm in Panama for as little as $13,000. This farm is going to be planted with the most in-demand varietals of specialty coffee in the market today. The farms are professionally managed for you on a turnkey basis, and you own the land. It's a low-risk opportunity with an average annual return projected at 12%, and that doesn't even include potential appreciation in the value of the land. These affordable raw land offerings are available only for Get Rich Education listeners through June 30th, and then if there are any parcels left at that time, the offer is going to go public. Parcels are allocated on a first-come, first-served basis. To learn more, just send an email with your contact info to coffee@getricheducation.com.
Are you looking for a roadmap to financial freedom? If so, we have a solution for you. Norada Real Estate is offering a limited number of free strategy sessions to help you get out of the rat race. Learn how you can create wealth and build monthly passive income. To set up a time with one of our knowledgeable investment counselors, simply go to noradarealestate.com. That's NORADA realestate.com.
This is Rich Dad, Poor Dad author Robert Kiyosaki. Listen to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
Welcome back to Get Rich Education with our featured guest, Rich Dad Advisor Ken McElroy. So, Ken, this is a really interesting time here. While prices of real estate have heated up and cap rates have been run down, and you are one of the biggest syndicators on the entire globe today. So, I want to know, where in the heck are you finding your deals today in this market? How are you doing it?
Oh, they're hard to find. I will tell you that. So we like to focus on, and I've talked to you before about this. I've written quite a bit about it. We don't like to be a pioneer in any town. So we basically can't invest right now in the primary markets. So that's important to know. The primary markets would be like Seattle, San Francisco, LA, New York, Boston, Chicago, those kinds of markets, because all the what I call the dumb money is coming into it, which is Wall Street. Because that's really other people's money again, like we talked about in the first segment, and it's just being invested by a bunch of people placing it. So what we've had to do is go into second and third tier markets. The third tier markets can be kind of risky, however, if they're based too heavily on let's say one employer or just a few. So, or it could be like a great example would be the North Dakota everybody kind of went there, because of oil. That's probably the best example. That would be considered a third tier market. And I probably got asked at least once or twice a month over a period of 2 years to go do something up there. And I never did, because I've seen a boom and bust before like that. Something that is entirely based on oil prices is not necessarily a good spot to be. But I think that if you're looking at it from what we would call a capital gain standpoint, you might time it right. And I'm sure there's a bunch of people that made very good money up there during that time, but there's also a bunch of people that lost a bunch just recently. So it could be the exact same thing around a military base or something like that too. So we've had properties in and around military bases, and as they deploy, let's say, personnel out into other areas, it reduces the population and the renter base and things like that. So those third tier markets can be tough, and so you just got to be very careful about those. We prefer the second tier, although there's a lot of money moving into second tier right now. So a second tier market, believe it or not, is something like, let's say, Tucson or even Las Vegas. Las Vegas, however, is also based heavily on tourism. So when the economy is doing well, Las Vegas is doing well. Not necessarily the best market, but because it's not as diverse as you would want. But it is, well over 1 million. Well, we've got 1.5 million people now. So again, it's only based on people flying into town and staying at the casinos and going out and, spending $1,000 a day on bottles of wine and all that. So I think that, you just got to be careful of those. But there are definitely ways to make money in those markets. And so what we like to do is try to take a look at where employers are going and try to be ahead of that a little bit. The other thing that can really throw a market off is construction. So some of these small markets like Austin, Texas, which is really a second tier market, is, I think it has like 16,000 apartments under construction right now. So, it's heading into some real tough, few years ahead of it. Whereas Phoenix, I think, has 8, and Phoenix is much bigger. So you got to look at supply at the same time. But, as we start to look at these markets, we like Austin, believe it or not, in some areas. We like San Antonio. We like Tucson. We like, of course, Phoenix, which is where I'm based. We like Tulsa, Oklahoma, and some of those markets. Salt Lake City. We're looking at all of those.
Okay, and we're talking about different market tiers here, and I'm saying this mostly for the benefit of the listener: primary, secondary, or tertiary, which is third tier. We're generally talking about the population, the metro size of an urban agglomeration. And typically when you have greater size, you do have more market, industry, and sector diversification. So just a general correlation, bigger size, you're more likely to be hedged against economic downturn. But there are shorter term things going on as well. And it sounds like, in Austin, perhaps demand could be lagging behind supply a little bit since there's an awful lot of new construction coming on board. So you can't just look at the size of a metro area and know how safe you are just simply based on the size of it.
Right. And I think that if you take a look at the nice thing about real estate is that there's quite a lag with it, so as occupancy rates tick up or rent growth ticks up, you can almost bet that there's going to be development to throw it off at some point. So banks like to lend in strong markets. So if the occupancy and the rent has year over year growth, then people are going to be buying land and building. At some point, however, there's too much being built, and then the numbers change again.
So with this lag effect in real estate, I want to get a number from you, an approximate period of time at which when one sees oil prices fall so dramatically like they have, and they really just began their decline about 2 years ago, when that really catches up with the market. Of course, there's plenty of it depends factors, but for me, I live in Anchorage, Alaska. That's where I am today. I have local rentals, and I still have great occupancy. I have not gotten rent increases the past 2 years, but I still have fantastic occupancy, which is really the important thing. So I've held on for about 2 years. What do you think that period of time is where you can see a precipitous decline in the price of a barrel of oil to when that really catches up with you and you really have significant effects and vacancies in a market?
Well, we're seeing, I could just speak from real experience. We have property in Houston, Texas, and it shows up at the moment people lose jobs.
Yeah.
So, if there's jobs that are lost, people typically move and or look for other jobs, which sometimes means they're moving, not necessarily always, but whenever you start to see that, it shows up immediately. So if as oil went down, we definitely saw it, within just a few months in, the Corpus Christi and the Houston area. And then of course it spills over into Dallas and Fort Worth and San Antonio and some of the other markets. On the supply side, however, if you're looking at that, it can take a year and a half, 2 years before it starts to show up, because you have to buy the land, you have to go get the loan, it takes a year to build it, it's not even ready to be moved into. So that's why I'm saying on the supply side, it doesn't show up as quickly, which is nice. So if you already own something, then you can really, really, really be careful and, kind of watch that supply side. So for example, we actually listed a property in Austin 2 weeks ago. And in 5 years, it's being listed for 10 million more than we bought it for. So, that's entirely based on the demand of the market.
Yeah, congrats.
Yeah, we'll have to close it, but yeah, it's we'll see where it goes.
All right, so we're getting a little idea of your deal flow here. Where do you find your deals as far as not geographically, but conduit-wise? I mean, do you have someone go through LoopNet? And I'm sure you've got a lot of great relationships with brokers. I mean, do some of your deals still come from a resource like LoopNet, or are they all pocket listings at this point? Or
Great question. We look at all of those things. We're tied into everything. We like to work with brokers. Here's typically my experience. A lot of times what happens with the LoopNet stuff is the seller has typically been a little bit unrealistic, and maybe they've even listed it before. Sometimes you find deals with just tough sellers. So I think that we like to work with brokers because that means that the seller has agreed to some kind of value and the broker's putting it out on the market at that kind of value. Nothing wrong with working with sellers directly, but my experience is that they're typically a little bit unrealistic on what they want. And you're not always getting the great deals that you would think by going to a seller directly. The best deals that we've ever gotten were when we bought from banks. Because what happens when a bank takes back a piece of real estate, it's actually toxic for them to have that on their books. It affects their ability to lend. So I can't remember exactly what it's called, but I know when we buy it, it's from the REO department, the real estate owned department of the bank. And if the bank has too many assets in that category, then they get penalized on being able to put money out. So they're typically taking losses on a loan and, selling them back out to somebody. So the best deals that we've ever gotten were buying directly from banks.
good to know. And, I had another question pop in my head. We were just talking about geography a little bit earlier there. We're talking about buying in primary, secondary, or tertiary markets. So I know that you and MC Companies, which is a large company, and you do have hundreds of employees at MC Companies, right?
Yes, 350.
350?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a lot of kind of a central place for not just buying power, but for knowledge and everything else. So, I want to know, why would MC Companies maybe go to a secondary market in the geography where you continue to hang out, which is mostly the southwestern United States and the South? Why not try a primary market? For example, I know that there are markets with sweet spots in places like Philadelphia and Milwaukee. Why not go into a primary market? Because we do have more and more people moving to cities as between censuses, society has urbanized a little bit more. So why not try those out? Or have you? And I just haven't heard about it.
Another very good question. Well, first of all, just being selfish, I don't really want to be on a plane that much. And so my deal with my family was, 2 hours on a plane. So that basically gets me to the western half of the U.S. And the truth is there's deals everywhere. So there's deals to be had everywhere. I mean, I can be from where we are in Phoenix, I can be in Salt Lake in just a little over an hour, all over LA or all over California, an hour to 2 hours. Same with Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana. So, we're looking at all of those markets. And then, of course, Texas is just 2 hours as well. So that's primarily the reason. There's just a lot to do. There's a lot of markets and there's plenty of inventory, and maybe someday we'll look a little more east.
Okay, yeah, I think that's really an appropriate answer. And it just kind of tells the listener that, yeah, you don't need the entire country. We're a big country and there's a lot of deals. There's even a lot of deals in the town that you live in. It always doesn't have to be buy and hold real estate investing either. And I know a bit about Ken. I know he's quite a family guy. He's really involved with his children. And every summer you have essentially a retreat with your children where you take a lot of the summer months off.
I do. Yeah, I take the whole summer off, actually. They get out of school in 10 days and I move. And I don't work all of June and all of July. And then one last thing I wanted to say on that last piece that I think is important because, I get, I don't know, hundreds of deals a week to my email, just like probably a lot of people. After a while, as you start to show up on lists, and you don't even know how, but you're on people's lists. And in the beginning, you're trying to get on everybody's lists, and now you're trying to get off of everybody's list.
Right.
But the point is, I get deals from Philadelphia. I get deals from Wisconsin. I probably get 5 or 6 deals a week from Florida. I just delete them. This has a lot to do with focus. And I think that I'm trying to be as efficient as I can. We totally understand almost most of the big Texas markets. We completely understand Oklahoma. We completely understand Arizona. Not that we just focus on those markets, but those are deals that I can look at in less than 10 minutes and know whether or not I want to pursue it to the next thing. So we even focused on those deals. We looked at 600 deals last year, and we made 58 offers, and we got into about 28 best and finals. I think it was 28 or somewhere around 30 best and finals. And we only bought one. So you can tell, the amount of, and that's just in the Western areas, that we're looking at. So you can go crazy looking all over the place. And the biggest issue I think people have is when they buy something, let's say they live in Phoenix and they buy something in Florida, is not having what I call boots on the ground, not having people there that can help you if something goes sideways, or even people there that they can trust. So the intangible are the relationships that we have in those markets with the brokers and the property managers. I can look at something in Dallas on paper and call up some people that I know there and have a rent survey done, within 24 hours. And whereas in Florida, I got to call somebody I don't know. And, so there's a tremendous amount of risk closure, I guess, it's by just having some of those relationships.
So when you've narrowed your focus, you're just more, I guess, privy to and in tune with the type of information. You talked a little bit about brokers and relationships, but also that type of information where you might learn that a large hospital campus is going to be breaking ground in a certain section of San Antonio, and that's going to be good for sustainable demand for renters that can pay incomes for many years. So therefore, that may increase the chances that you would want to buy a 500-unit complex in northeast of San Antonio or something like that, for example.
That's exactly right. And versus, at the same time, within the hour, I might get a deal from Florida, and it might look beautiful on the brochure, and it's on a lake, and, in Orlando, let's say. Well, I just don't have the relationships there. And of course, there's market nuances too. On one side, I was looking at a deal today in Austin, whereas literally the Interstate 35 on one side of the street has different rates than the other, literally on one side of the interstate versus the other. So those little things can show up in every market. You have to know that information before you go in blindly.
So as you're analyzing markets, are there really, I guess, any more broad demographic trends that you see coming in the near-term future? You want to skate to where the hockey puck's going. You want to focus, FOCUS, follow one course until successful. What about demographic trends, whether that's people moving to low-tax states or people moving into central business districts and downtowns? How does that influence what you buy? What are you looking at? What are you looking for? Where are we going to go?
It influences a lot. I mean, that's the other part that I think is very fun, because what happens a lot of times is people chase real estate because of the price. And that's way down the list for me, at least. And,
Yep.
if you just look at, for example, I know we've talked before about seniors. There's a huge number of seniors that are moving to their primary homes and moving into rentals, and they want to have a little bit different lifestyle without that anchor of their home. Well, you can kind of track where all they're going. Most of them are active. So that's one demographic. Another demographic is the millennials, which are coming out of school right now, perhaps, or even maybe they already have, or maybe they haven't at all, and they're living at their home with their parents. And that's a huge number. And I've read as it could be as much as 25 million people living at home right now that are, say, under the age of 25. So that's a renter demographic. So you start to see these trends show up, and really what generates, I think, everything is jobs. So, which markets are progressive and which ones aren't? You start to look at cities, even counties that are shrinking, and a lot of that has to do with tax. And a lot of that has to do with jobs. Like obviously the one that gets used a lot is Detroit. Detroit, after the cars manufacturing kind of got outsourced, or anything that's based manufacturing, is generally shrinking. Although I think that it's starting to make some moves back the other way. Now you're starting to see all the tech pop up, right? So Austin's tech, Silicon Valley, of course, is all tech, but there's also little other areas all competing for tech right now. And so those are all good things to watch. And once you figure that out, then then you realize that there's demand in a market. That's how you invest. You don't do it the other way around and, hope.
You don't hope, and you typically don't start with the property either. You usually finish up with the property when you're looking at at analyzing a real estate market.
Right. Yeah. Hope's not a good strategy.
Never has been, never will be. All right. So we're talking about demographic trends and where people are moving to, and people need jobs and jobs produce incomes. And that's largely a residential based phenomenon we're talking about there. Do you see any, sectors within real estate that are good to exploit in the next 5 to 10 years other than residential, whether that's self-storage or mobile home parks or luxury real estate or resort real estate or efficiency apartments for millennials? What's a good place to focus on there to profit?
Yes. The answer is yes on all of those things. So I'm actually in the process of looking at self-storages. We're actually building one. We have some in escrow. I've looked at mobile home parks. We have a lot of land. I've done condos. We've done single family. Primarily we're known as apartment guys. I just bought an office building about 6 months ago in Scottsdale. So I'm looking at all kinds of things, I guess is the point. And again, I don't think you should be all in one sector, but I think you should understand it. And they all have different they're all different. So as an example, if you think about it, office buildings are in trouble right now because online retail. So retailers are in trouble. If you look, there was an article that came out in the National Real Estate Investor magazine that talked about, some very big stores are going out of business right now. We had in Scottsdale here, which is growing incredibly, we had Barney's go out of business in the last month, which is at our big Scottsdale fashion mall. And Barney's is a big national retailer. So you start to look at these companies that are struggling with online retail. I don't know about you, but my wife, we have more Amazon boxes showing up at our house from Nordstrom and all kinds of stuff. And, that's how she shops now. So I think, it's common sense. If you start to look at those kinds of things, then you start to realize maybe I shouldn't go into retail or malls. Malls are in trouble right now. And office buildings are also potentially in trouble for that reason. But not all office building. I bought an office building in Scottsdale, and the rents the sizes are 1,500 to 2,500 square feet. There's like 20 tenants, and they're insurance agents, they're CPAs, they're lawyers and things like that aren't going to be affected at that level. But people paint a broad brush and they say, office buildings are bad, or retail's bad, or self-storage is bad, but it's not. You just have to look at where it is, and is there an under demand or an over demand? And I bought land 5-6 years ago, and everybody thought we were crazy, but now that the land has doubled in price. And so we have the option now to sell it or build on it. Both are good options. And I'm not sure which we're going to do. So you just got to watch, when everybody's running to the hills, prices are going down. That's when you want to start to take a look at those things. But even then, it's not necessarily always a good price and a good deal, right? You just got to be careful.
Yeah, that's right. Just like the answer is to most real estate questions, it depends. The answer to most real estate questions is more than one sentence long.
Yeah, and I know people really get frustrated with that answer, and I get it. They want the answer. They want to know. My situation's different, right? They all think that their situation is different. They want the quick answer, but it's just not that. It can't be that way. If just even in your community in Anchorage, you guys have gone through ups and downs in your own community, and for tourism and fishing and all that kind of stuff. And oil, right? So I think as things happen in different communities around the country, you just got to pay attention to it and try to be in front of it.
It's actually interesting. When you're a real estate investor, it just seems like at least 1/3 of the USA Today articles you read, you can tie into what you can do and what you can invest in yourself. And that might be insider information in stocks, but you can use every bit of that as a real estate investor.
I think that is a great, great analogy. I actually did a seminar once where we opened up a newspaper in front of the room and we went through it. And we said, this is how this article affects real estate. This is how this article affects real estate. This is how this article affects real estate. Whether it was a downsizing of an employer or an upsizing of an employer or a merger or an interest rates or bank closures or property openings or whatever. I'm telling you, you could open any business journal or any newspaper, and most of the articles in there have some kind of an influence on real estate.
I believe every bit of that could be true. So, well, Ken, by this point, you've really amassed so many books that have sold well. I mean, you've really been one of the more, I think, prolific contributors to real estate investing education and financial education today. One of the ways you contributed is something I'm very familiar with because I've been a longtime subscriber myself, and that is your video series, KenFlix. Tell us about KenFlix.
Okay, thank you, by the way. Yes, what happened is the books for me were not planned. Robert became one of my investors, Robert Kiyosaki, and then he asked me to write some books on what I do. And so the book, we donate all our money to charity for all our books. All the book sales all go to our nonprofit and then get distributed out to cystic fibrosis and autism. And I think we have like 25 charities that we support. But what was happening when the books came out, the emails, and you can imagine, were just pouring in. And they're all good people, really good people, asking very good questions. And there's just no way I could keep up on it. I mean, literally, my assistant would put them into a file. And the problem was I would email somebody back. I tried to work this into my work, and I just couldn't. I would email somebody back and then they have 2 or 3 more questions back. And so, which is totally fine. I get it. But, so what I started to do was just take all those questions and do videos because it's a lot easier. And also I found that a lot of the questions were similar. So not all of them, but a lot of them were very similar. So the whole idea behind KenFlix was and it still is, it's entirely the questions and the videos that I have on there is information that I get from people asking questions. So it's not really something that I thought about. It's actually entirely driven by the questions that people have.
Yeah, it's kind of nice. I don't know if they're giving you all the content, but they're giving you leads about the content that they want to hear about back. And you're ahead of me. I continue to get more and more questions, mostly through email with Get Rich Education. And I know I sure cannot respond to all of them. And I feel a little bit bad sometimes, but yeah, your videos are really well done. And, I got to admit, sometimes I watch those videos. A lot of times you have a big easel and a big pad of paper where you're demonstrating things. And, I get a couple ideas for my show. I'm like, oh, I haven't talked about that on my show yet. And I really like the way that Ken described that visually in the video. So KenFlix is totally worth checking out.
Thanks a lot. It's been a lot of fun. The other part that's been great for me is for my time, we get all the emails from all the people, and then we go through them, and I'll go into the studio for, say 3 or 4 hours, and I'll knock out maybe 15 of them. And it's just really nice to be able to accommodate what people want, direct everybody to one location, and also just to help.
And KenFlix, that's KenFlix.com, where you can check out Ken's video series. Well, that's great. Well, Ken, how can our listeners find out more about you?
Well, either KenFlix, KenFlix, or KenMcElroy.com, KenMcElroy, or our company website is MC Companies. That's MCCOMPANIES.com. So, we're pretty efficient on getting back to people and, happy to answer any questions we can.
Ken McElroy, thanks for coming back on to Get Rich Education.
Thank you, Keith. Great chatting again.
Yeah, one of the more fun chats with Kenny there. Now, you understood this from earlier, right? Now, let's just say that you're given $10 million, all right? That's your liability. You've just been given a job, okay? Dealing with that $10 million is your problem. Well, that doesn't exactly feel like a problem to you. We'll say that you're the bank and you need to pay a depositor 1% interest on that $10 million, okay? Your problem is that now you've got to make $100,000 a year in interest payments on that. So therefore, you absolutely must find an investment that pays more than 1% per year because you can't dip into the $10 million principal. As a bank, what you do is you go ahead and make a 4% interest rate loan to someone like a real estate investor like me to solve your problem, okay? Well, now your profit is the 4% interest rate loan that you made to me minus the 1% that you're paying your depositor, and the spread, that 3%, that's your arbitrage. So annually, you're profiting 3% on that $10 million deposit. Well, now you transfer the problem to me is sort of what you've done, because now I need to pay the 4% interest rate over to you. So what I do to solve my problem, I do what you, the bank, just did, okay? And what I do is I go buy an apartment building with the $10 million that I got from you. That apartment building yields an 8% cap rate, we'll just say. So 8% minus the 4% interest rate. And now I have a 4% arbitrage myself. So I beat the banks by doing exactly what banks do. I borrow from the bank at a lower rate and invest at a higher rate, which I will do all day. And you know what? I've got to credit GRE listeners for doing the same thing. Okay, you are acting by purchasing cash flowing turnkey real estate. So turnkey means that you're buying the property already tenanted, already renovated, already under management, and typically warranted for you too. These properties should provide you with passive income from day one. GRE listeners have scooped up dozens of homes from that extraordinary provider, Mid-South Homebuyers in Memphis, Tennessee. That's at midsouthhomebuyers.com. And for more opportunities in markets outside Memphis, GRE listeners are subscribing to our newsletter at GetRichEducation.com. You have been an action taker by purchasing properties through the webinar link that we send out in our newsletter. You've been buying turnkeys in Philadelphia, Chicago, Kansas City, and Indianapolis. With those free newsletters, I only have a webinar link sent out like every 1 to 2 months. I don't blow up anyone's inbox with too many newsletters. I only send out information and opportunities when I feel like I have something of real value to provide to you. Subscribe to that free newsletter yourself simply by visiting GetRichEducation.com. Special thanks to Rich Dad Advisor Ken McElroy today. Sincere thanks to you for joining me today. Next week, you're going to meet a real estate entrepreneur, and she has such a fantastic creative system for increasing her cash flow on her buy and hold real estate that I just had to bring it to you because you can use this same technique too. Until then, you might quit your day job, but don't quit your daydream.
You've been listening to Get Rich Education, telling you what the wealthy won't tell you about real estate and investing. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to visit iTunes and leave your comments.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.